Hello. Okay, can you hear? Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers for this wonderful workshop. I'm happy to be here today. So I should tell you, I apologize from now because I think I have completed 25 hours without sleep. So I apologize if I sound incoherent from now. So I'll start with the most important. I'd like to thank the topic I'm going to talk about today was the result of a very nice collaboration between two experimental teams, my team and the John Rarity's team at the University of Bristol, and also several theoretical teams from Iordanis Kerenis from Paris Diderot and Indria Paris and Tessa Yu, and of course Martin, who brought all of us together. So it's a difficult subject, and hopefully I'll explain to you why. I will start with a couple of things, first presenting a general presentation about a few activities that we do in my lab, and then I'll focus on this particular work. So the context, first of all. Okay, so I'll be talking about quantum communication networks. What are we interested in? We're using resources in my lab that can vary between single photon and tangle photon and electromagnetic field quantum encoding, so-called DV or CV encodings. We're interested in security, where we assume that we have untrusted network users and untrusted devices, okay, which is a realistic setting in real communication networks. We're interested in the performance that can be achieved in these networks for practical applications, and of course, the interest is to achieve a rigorous security analysis and perform the verification protocols that are required to be able to show a provable quantum advantage in practice. Okay, so there is several security models that one can consider. I'm going to start from the easiest one and go to the most complex one, which is the one that I'm going to be focusing on. So the easiest, if I can call it that, and so the most advanced is of course two-party secure communications. The exemplary, of course, case is quantum Q distribution, where we assume that we have Alice and Bob that trust each other, but they do not trust the channel between them, okay, which can be eavesdropped. So this primitive enables secure message exchange, and we have heard about it a lot, and it's one of the most advanced, of course, protocols in secure quantum communications. So in our lab, we work quite a bit on this subject. We're working in particular on the continuous variable quantum key distribution. We have built the setups now that can perform long-distance communications. We have done stability tests in field, side channel attacks, and we're working currently towards silicon photonic integrated devices, okay, in this subject. So I think you're going to hear more about CVQKT tomorrow. This is not the subject of this talk. Another model now that is even more complex, starts becoming even more difficult as a security model, is when we assume that Alice and Bob now are distrustful. Okay, this is the next case of security that is interesting as in a network, whereas Alice and Bob are distrustful, they do not trust each other, they do not need an eavesdropper, they can be dishonest, one of them can be dishonest, and of course the channel remains untrusted. So there is a few joint operations that can be achieved in this model, like bit commitment, coin flipping, oblivious transfers, and a lot more that have been developed in the last years. So yeah, in the last year there has been a huge effort from many teams with very beautiful theoretical work and experiments on bringing to real life, let's say, this type of practical security protocols. So in our lab we have worked on coin flipping. So we have done a plug-and-play quantum coin flipping setup that was based on a ID quantic quantum key distribution device that we let's say retouched so that it can do coin flipping in practical conditions. So we demonstrated a quantum advantage, a rigorously demonstrated based on a security proof adapted to the practical imperfections of the setup. In terms of the cheating probability that can be achieved by the dishonest player, over 15 kilometers of optical fiber. So this is already the fact that this security model between distrustful parties is more difficult in the sense that Alice and Bob cannot perform post-processing afterwards, error correction, private simplification, etc., because they do not trust each other, puts more stringent constraints in the security, and therefore we cannot go easily much further, okay? So for example, you see here in this graph that for 25 kilometers with the same experimental conditions, we were not able to beat the classical bound, the bound that we beat for 15 kilometers. So this is very important to perform a rigorous security analysis of this type of protocols. And so now the next security model concerns now multiple parties, and this is what I'm going to focus on. So it's multi-party secure communications. So we're interested here in distributed communication or computation tasks with multiple untrusted parties in a single network. And this setting is very interesting, of course, for any quantum network because it enables much more advanced quantum network protocols, and of course, because it's an even more difficult setting, security model, it puts even higher, as you are going to see, constraints in the performance of the resources that are required for achieving this type of protocols. Okay. So more specifically, the question that we will want to ask is the following. We assume in this setting that we have several parties in the network that wish to perform a task, okay, a distributed computational communication task. So they have as a resource multipartite entangled photon state. In this particular work, we have assumed that they have a GAZ state. Okay, I'm going to define it in a second, an n-party GAZ state. And the question that we want to answer is the following. Can the honest parties in this set of players verify the entanglement of this resource before carrying out this distributed task in the presence of untrusted parties and of practical imperfections? Okay, so this is, I repeat, a realistic setting where it is normal that you cannot trust everyone in the network, and there are also defective devices, and the question is, do the honest parties can actually consider that they do have a GAZ state that they can use for example, for do secret sharing or a bunch of other protocols that are relying on this type of states, okay? So the theoretical protocol was developed a few years ago, the initial abstract, let's say, theoretical protocol, and we have now recently analyzed it in the presence of losses and other imperfections and performed it experimentally, okay? So let's go and see the protocol. So this is the model for the entanglement verification we're interested in. So I repeat here the model, the setting where we are. We're going to assume that we have an untrusted source which is supposed to generate and send among n parties this GAZ state, okay? We're going to consider that we have an arbitrary number of dishonest parties, so we're not limiting the number of dishonest parties in this set. We allow them to collaborate with the source. So the source is also untrusted in this model, okay? So in terms of local resources, we're going to say that the honest parties have a trusted single qubit measurement device, so this is important here, a trusted. Our protocol is not a device independent as it is. Okay, so the measurement device has to be trusted, and we also allow to the parties to share pairwise private channels. Okay, they have to have private communication channels between them, which is a classical, which is typical assumption, standard assumption in classical networks. So what is the goal of this model? The honest parties, their goal is to determine how close their state is with respect to the ideal GAZ state, and they also want to verify genuine multipartite entanglement, okay, that I'm going to be calling GME. And the goal of the dishonest parties is to convince the honest parties of their resource that they do have what they expect, while this might not be the case. Okay, so hopefully now the setting is clear, and we're going to see a protocol that performs, that allows to do exactly that. So this is a verification protocol. Let me guide you through it. we choose a verifier. Among all the players, we're going to choose a verifier who chooses an angle theta j for party j. Okay, so we're going to suppose you see already here that party j is supposed to be a polarization encoded, because in the experiment that I'm going to show later it's going to be, everything is going to be encoded in polarization of single photons. So the verifier chooses the angle theta j for party j such that, and for all the players, such that the summation of all the angles is a multiple of pi. Okay, this is the condition initial or that has to be satisfied for the inputs to the protocol. These angles are then sent to each party, and each party performs a measurement in a plus theta j and minus theta j basis and returns the outcome y1. Okay, y, which can be 0 or 1. So they return the outcome of their measurement. Then what is happening? The next thing that happens in the protocol is that the verifier checks the pass condition. So it looks a little bit weird, this pass condition, but basically it tells the following, that if the summation of all the input angles, the random choice of angles here, is an even multiple of pi, then there should be an even number of 1 outcomes, okay? And the same for odd numbers, okay? If the summation of the randomly chosen angles here is an odd number, is an odd multiple of pi, then there should be an odd number of ones in the outcomes that are sent from the players to the verifier. So the verifier checks this condition, and then he fails, and then we're going to add later the possibility of saying loss as well for a player later. Okay, so this is the basic protocol that we have devised. Actually, chronologically, the protocol that came first, which was a bit more simple, was a protocol that I'm going to be calling XY protocol instead of theta protocol, where it was much simpler in the sense that the angles theta j could be fixed only to 0 or pi over 2, which basically means that the measurement were limited to the x or y basis. Okay, so you see that was a much simpler setting, but the reason why it wasn't working, and I'm going to explain, in principle it was working, it was doing what we wanted, but in reality when you add losses, I'm going to explain a little bit later, you will see that it wasn't at all loss tolerant, okay? So this is a standard trick, let's say, in this type of protocols where you add a certain number of measurement bases so that you make your protocol loss tolerant. This is a typical trick, let's say, that we do in steering as well in this type of protocol. So the first thing that one needs to check is the correctness. So it is for an ideal GLZ state, the test succeeds with probability 1. Okay, and so we know then that the correctness of the protocol for an ideal GLZ state, this protocol does what we want to do. The question now is the theoretical work that needs to be done after that is to bound. For a non-ideal GLZ state, for a state that is non-GME or GME, etc., for any state that could be generated by the dishonest parties and the source, what we can say, what the honest parties can say about the fidelity of the state and the probability of passing the test. And this is exactly what our theoretical analysis, what we have done in our theoretical analysis. So the first thing that we have done is the theoretical bounds for the non-loss case. Okay, so the case when all parties are honest, we have linked. Unfortunately, here I'm not going to give the proofs. Hopefully, the paper will be in the archive very soon, any day now. So I invite you to check all the proofs. So the case with all the honest parties, the fidelity of the shared state that we define as this. So let's assume that we have the shared state rho, and the fidelity with respect to the ideal GLZ is given by this expression, and the probability of passing the verification test is given by this expression. Then we have found that there is this bound that has to be satisfied between this fidelity and the probability of passing the test, and then this allows us to make easily the connection, finding the bound for the presence of genuine multi-party entanglement in this setting, okay? So since we know that GME is present if the fidelity of a state is greater than 1 over 2, then we can easily see from this expression that if we have the probability of passing the test is greater than 3 over 4, so 75%, the players, the honest players, can verify they have a genuine multi-party entanglement in this state. So this puts a first requirement, let's say, in any experimental verification, is that you have to have a state that succeeds with probability overcoming this number, this bound. Let us now look at the case that is harder, the case with k honest and n minus k dishonest parties. Here the situation becomes more complex in the sense that we cannot prevent the dishonest parties from applying. We have to always think that they can always collaborate between themselves and with the source, and they can always, of course, apply a local or a joint operation to their part of the state. So this is shown here. We see that we allow, so the fidelity now is defined as a maximum fidelity over all the states where the dishonest parties have applied a unitary on their part of the state. So a quite complex theoretical analysis of this situation yields the following bounds for the probabilities of passing the test, where we see that for the theta protocol, I remind you, this is the protocol where the verifier needs to send the randomly chosen angles theta j that are between 0 and pi. we find this bound for the probability of success for the protocol to show GME. And for the XY protocol, the simplified protocol, you see that the bound is harder. So basically, the probability of passing the test is harder, is above this value, which is of course more difficult to succeed, to do experimentally. Okay, and we're going to see that indeed this makes the experiment more difficult or even impossible to achieve for this protocol. So this is what happens. So now we have found our theoretical bounds for no loss for the protocols with all honest parties and the protocols with k with n minus k dishonest parties. Okay. So now the next step, which is actually the hardest yet, is to see what's happening when we include loss in this protocol. Okay. So in that case, we're going to say that the verifier is ready to accept a certain loss rate. We call this lambda from any party. This can be due, of course, in practice to many imperfections, practical imperfections. It can be honest or dishonest. This is a problem. So the idea is that whenever a player declares loss, they have to abort the protocol, etc. So the problem with the security when there is loss is that the dishonest party may increase the overall pass probability of the state by declaring loss whenever the probability to pass a specific measurement request by the verifier is low. Okay, so I'm going to give you a very simple example to make this clear. For the XY protocol, I remind you the XY protocol is when the players perform only measurements in the X and or the Y basis. In this case, we can see immediately, for example, for the three-party case, we can see immediately that the test with one dishonest party fails at 50% loss rate already. Okay, so it cannot work for a loss rate exceeding 50%. A very easy attack that you can, cheating, let's say, strategy that you can see in this case is that the source and the dishonest player together, they send this non-genuine multipartite entangled state, where they have a bell pair shared between Alice and Bob, between the two honest players, and this separable state sent to the dishonest party that the dishonest party has. And so it is actually pretty obvious to see that if the dishonest party can say loss for half of the cases, well, whenever he receives the measurement basis X, he's going to always give the correct result, while whenever he receives the measurement Y, to give the result to the measurement in the basis Y, he will never get a result and he will declare loss. Okay, so immediately you can see that he will pass the test with probability 1, although this state, which is a non-genuine multipartite entangled state, has been shared between the three parties. Okay, so this is a typical example of a case where we can see that the losses between losses in the experimental system immediately affect the security of the protocol. So based on this type of argument, we can go on and analytically find verification bounds as a function of loss rates for all cases, for all the honest and the cheating players cases, and describe optimal cheating strategies to achieve these bounds with non-GME states, which is basically completes the security analysis of these protocols. Okay, so I'm going to come back slowly to this when I show you the results, so that I can show you in practice how all this looks like in practice when you try to verify your entanglement. So this completes the security analysis of the protocol. I'm going to show you the experimental setup that we used for the verification, for the multipartite entanglement verification. So this is based on the microstructure, on the entangled photon sources that are built for some years now in John Rarity's lab, that are based on microstructure fibers in a Sagnac configuration and diffusion operation that are performed on a polarizing beam splitter. So these are at wavelengths, the signal line are at the wavelengths of 870 and 620 nanometers more or less. And the condition this experiment produces post-selected generation of 3 and 4 party GZ states, polarization encoding, when you have one single photon. This is post-selected on a single photon coming out of these 4 ports. Okay, so the difficulty now in this experiment related to the particular verification protocol that we want to implement is that we need if we want to really follow the protocol as it is, and this is what we worked on a lot in this experiment, is we need to be able to rotate this basis, the measurement basis, at the single shot. So not take average lots of data, and then, which is usually the case in this type of experiments, and then select the nice basis and do some averaging. But really, after we did single shot of measurements with measurement angles changed after every detection event. So this represented a particularly interesting experimental challenge. Okay, so we used automated systems to be able to perform this type of really applying the protocol as it is designed. So the state tomography that we achieved with this experiment were quite high for the GAZ states, and this was necessary to be able to show anything in this very particularly stringent, as I was saying before, scenario, experimental scenario. So let me show you the result. Already, if I can make you, I will get you through this result basically. So if you understand this, then basically we're done. So let me explain to you what all these curves are. First of all, this turquoise line here, this blue line, corresponds to the XY protocol. This, I remind you, is a simple protocol that uses only X and Y basis measurements for the parties, while the purple line is for the more advanced theta protocol that was designed to make the protocol loss tolerant. Okay? Indeed, you can see here what I was saying before, that for a loss rate at 50%, the pass probability for a state becomes 100%, which basically means that above this, at this level, it is not possible anymore to verify genuine multipartite entanglement. Okay, so I remind you here that what this bounds means is that for the honest parties needed to have a pass probability of their state above this gap to be able to say to have a guarantee that the state, that the resource that they have is a state that is designed. Okay, is a true multipartite entangled state. So you see here for zero loss the bounds that we talked before, we said before. For the XY protocol, this is the bound. For the theta protocol, this is the bound that we have calculated for zero loss. So first of all, we performed experiments that gave us these experimental values for zero loss for the our state, the actual state that we had in the lab with a fidelity. I remind you, this is for the three-party case that had a fidelity of 80%. So the first thing that we see here, that this is sufficient, the pass probability is sufficiently high, is above 75%, the 3/4. So the first thing that we can see is we can feel that we have genuine multipartite entanglement for the all honest case. But even in the case of dishonest parties, and this is the interesting part in this curve, so I should have magnified this, it's happening exactly here. So up to 5% of loss. So now I know this sounds small, but for a difficult experiment like this, it's not too bad. It's a proof of principle first indication. So up to 5% loss here, we can see that this curve here is above this bound, which basically means that up to 5% loss, we can verify, we can guarantee the presence of this of the desired multipartite entanglement in our experiment. And this, I really emphasize this to show to you that for example with the XY protocol, this is not possible. As you see, this bound here is above the experimental value, so it was not possible to show this with the previous protocol. So you need the more advanced protocol with a random choice of measurement basis to be able to show anything. And this is also with the GAZ states that have 80% fidelity. Okay, so if it was lower, even this would not have been possible. So that's why I'm insisting that you need to bring together advanced theoretical techniques and advanced experimental techniques to be able to show this in this type of particularly difficult conditions. So we also performed dishonest strategies. I'm not going to go through too much detail on this. We performed the optimal cheating strategy that we have identified. So in this case, for example, we start with a three-party GAZ, and the optimal cheating strategy was implemented by the dishonest party projecting himself out, such that the two honest parties receive some sort of optimized rotated Bell state. Okay, so we performed this experiment. So this follows the theoretical curves as you see, lower of course because our experimental state is not ideal. Okay, and we find that the results correspond to theory as expected. Okay, so I repeat here that the verification of the GME for loss. So I repeat here that the main result here is that we have verified genuine multi-party entanglement for loss up to 5%, and we have also implemented the dishonest strategies. Here, for example, this is an example of measurement where we see the pass probability as a function of the dishonest angle for zero loss. This allows us to calculate the average pass probability. These are this type of results that you see here, where this allows us to find this type of results. And then by increasing loss, basically we improve the cheating probability, the pass probability of the dishonest player, because what he does is that basically by increasing loss, he can see loss every time that the measurement angle is such that his pass probability will be small. So basically the average is increasing by how much this slice of measurement outcomes that he can get rid of. You see a little bit how it happens. Okay, intuitively, this is basically what happens. He can gain loss for all the, whenever he's asked to measure around here, he's saying loss with 10%, 20 or 30, etc. And so basically he improves his pass probability of the state. Okay. And so we performed a similar experiment for the 4-party GAZ. In this case, it's even harder. We have a fidelity of 70%. So this is not. So this at no point was not possible to overcome the bound, the theoretical bound. The experimental results remain lower, and we performed this type as well, the same type of dishonest strategy, the optimal dishonest strategy. So let me conclude and give some outlook on this work. So I've considered in this work the realistic setting of quantum photonic networks with distrustful parties and imperfect devices. So as I think I have convinced you, this sets stringent constraints on what can be shown in practice, but it does give us a good example of what we can expect in this type of advanced applications on networks. Okay. So we have done a proof of principle verification test for detecting genuine entanglement. And we have it actually not only detects genuine entanglement, but also obtains quantitative information. We know exactly how far our state is from the ideal GAZ state. So this is not trivial, and it's actually pretty important because this state is supposed to be used as a verified resource in quantum network protocols subsequently. Okay, so it's important to have quantitative information about the states that you actually want to use in your network. So improvement, of course, in these first results can be achieved, of course, with better fidelities in this type of state, and obviously a setup that is even more amenable to distributed computation and communication is when you can generate your states in a heralded way or a deterministic given way, which requires even more difficult experimental implementations. So the techniques that we have used are linked with self-testing and device independence and semi-device independence. And the idea behind this is that all these type of methods and techniques can be useful for practical distributed communication tasks and secure multi-party computation where we find this type of primitives like entanglement verification.
So if the next speaker is set up, well, we take one or two. Yeah, good. All right. So we don't have much time, 1 or 2 minutes. Any questions?
So we know that the GXZ state, the 3-party one, can be self-tested, and actually any n-party GXZ can be self-tested.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you compare your theoretical result to that statement?
Yes, I think it all depends on the conditions on what, I think, if I remember correctly, the self-testing of the GAZ states that you're talking about typically assumes untrusted devices, but not necessarily untrusted parties, dishonest parties that will not do the measurement that they are supposed to do. Okay, so it's a subtle difference to saying in what case, what matters is the device, if it's deficient or if it's a let's say, deliberate action of the dishonest party, but it kind of changed the setting. But the techniques are very similar, I think. It corroborates basically the self-testing results we're talking about.
Yeah, I think that's all the time we have. Thank you very much.